project managers. So we have a very strong project manager and also engineering culture. And we base most of our decision based on consensus. So we have 18 people, top level internal committee for most of the business decision within company. And you can imagine with that a huge committee actually is pretty hard, but actually it works very well. So our decisions are very efficient, very quick, respond to the market, and people have been working with each other for many years. They have very strong trust to each other. They respect each other. So even with our founders still highly involved in the daily business management, but the team actually makes the decision. So within that culture, actually, collaboration, that's kind of a mutual result of the whole organization, not only from like the investment side, but from like also the business collaboration side. We partner with millions of companies in China and globally. We do revenue share with them. We publish game for their contents. We deliver lots of like the content through like different channels. And within like investment side, we actually do much more minority investment than controlling stake investments. So we do believe that the entrepreneurship actually that's a rare resource in the resource allocation and also in the startup spirit. So even sometimes we take over some companies, we do acquire some gaming company. We still keep the entrepreneurs over there, and they work with us for a really long time. And most of the time, they're still in charge of the daily operation. So the collaboration spirit actually that's very important for us. And we do, we're happy to see us as a supporting role instead of like a job just dominating average transactions.
It's interesting how investment activity, especially in the venture space, works in China. I think a lot of people would be surprised to know that between yourselves and Alibaba, you're probably 40% of all of the venture activity that happens in China. You've got a very large portfolio, both of funds that you've done, both domestically and internationally, but also primarily direct investments. Can you give us just a little bit of a picture about what that portfolio, why you have that portfolio, what the purpose of it is, what you're focusing on that maybe in terms of themes internationally as opposed to domestically, just to give us a sense of what drives the overall strategy of Tencent Investments?
Sure. We started investing about 10 years ago. So along these 10 years, we pretty much spent most of the profit into this like investing activity. As I said, actually, we are very happy to support the new entrepreneurs to develop some business that we see like a great potential, not only in the digital content side, but also in like other areas. So cumulative number of our portfolio exceeds like 600 companies, including about like 60 GP relationship. So we also do like a fund investment, but that's a very small part of our business. In terms of like the industry, actually, we are pretty focused. So most of the investment activity actually does come along with the core business of Tencent. So digital content actually is the biggest part. We invest about 10 to 20 like gaming companies every year since like 10 years ago. Not too much, not too small. I know not so many like public investors that actually so good at like a gaming investment or so keen on gaming investment because like a high fluctuation of the industry. But since that's our core business, so we just do that pretty much every year. And we also do other digital content investment like literature, like the digital music and all the other contents. And a few years ago, I think back in 2013, we started into some new areas. That's not really our core business, but actually that's a very strong demand from users on the platform. Actually, that's e-commerce. So we first acquire independent e-commerce firm and try to operate by ourselves. But after a few years, competition with local competitors, we realized that might not be our DNA. So we merged that company with its biggest competitor in China market, which formed the later JD.com, and we invest another $1 billion into that company and become their biggest shareholder. So actually, that transaction totally changed our view how we can actually, foster our relationship with the partners and help them to become, kind of the dominant player on certain verticals. Then we invest in other companies like Didi, which is a ride-sharing leader in China, similar to Uber in Western world. We invest in Meituan, which is kind of the food delivery, and also the Yelp listing business in China. And we pretty much invest in every vertical, including education, medical, most of the sharing economic business. And we normally are the biggest minority shareholder, and we are also the biggest institutional shareholder of them. And we are very long-term investors. So, for example, Didi, we invest in the B round, and we still hold a significant chunk of that company. And many of the portfolios that get IPO last year or this year, but we're still holding them. And then we don't see any chance that we are going to reduce our stake because of the financial return reason. So we are pretty long-term, strategic, and we see the relationship with entrepreneur and also the companies themselves. Actually, that's critical for business in the past and in the future.
So, you have, as you say, a long-term and a long-term vision for why you're going into companies, and you've now started coming in and looking in Canada at companies. In fact, I was surprised to hear that you have 10 investments so far, some of which we've obviously been involved in with you, but even beyond the ones that you've done with BDC. And I'm interested just to then talk a little bit about the Canadian context and areas that your first impressions of where you've been looking at deal flow in Canada and what you're interested in, sectors, spaces that you think you're going to be looking at, potential opportunities down the road as you spend more time in Canada.
Sure. I'm also a little surprised when I try to summarize the numbers of deals we have here. So the 10 investment here actually that accounts for the number 3 of our global investment in terms of the single country, and that's quite surprised. And our first investment here was in 2015, and that company was called CIX, and that's a very young generation social platform, and focused on the Western market, and as a leading Chinese social market. So the reason to invest a smaller comparable company in Western world, actually that's easy to understand. Then we gradually invest several small gaming companies here. Actually 2 of them are actually based in Toronto, and we help them to grow their products and with the potential to publish their products in China. And last year, we invested a very interesting company called Webpack, introduced by Addison. And I'm not sure that whether you guys know about that. That's a very young generation, especially for the young girls, fantasy novel writing and the sharing site. If you don't know that, probably your daughter or granddaughter will know it for sure. And that's another case of the digital content side. And we also invest in several advanced technology. We are the last round investor of Element AI, together with many domestic investors. And we also sponsor some of the AI lab. They're in Montreal University, for the Professor Benjo's lab actually. So we have fairly different sector across in Canada, and it's interesting to see that even we only have 10 portfolios here, but that's actually spread in several different cities. So a few in Toronto, Waterloo, and Montreal, on the east side, and a few on the Vancouver side. And that's actually a very good indication of the average technology advancement of all these cities, and also where the talent goes. And also it's not difficult to see that since we are pretty like a PT investor in the gaming side, when we look at the companies here, actually the gaming production and creativity, actually the whole environment actually is very, very strong. So we are looking for like a more opportunities both on the digital content, especially on the gaming side, and also on the AI, for certain verticals. We are actually talking with several partners in that regard.
Yeah. Now it's interesting to see that obviously, as you said, this is your first time to Toronto. You're still getting a sense of the landscape. But I think it's interesting for the audience to understand also how you're set up in terms of how you look in North America. My understanding is you have an office in the Valley.
Yes.
You have a small office in Seattle, but at this point, so far, not yet an office in Canada. But so when people are trying to reach out to talk to you, beyond sitting sometimes in Asia like I do, how do people reach out and find a way to connect with Tencent? Should they be kind of meeting through your people in the Valley and Seattle, or what's your advice for companies who might be here who are interested in connecting with you?
Well, even though this is my first time to be in Toronto, I will be back next week. So you see our speed of like a development.
I made him do that, by the way.
Well. So we do have like a small office in Palo Alto, so that's our gaming, like the business development side. So we have very strong connection with most of like the gaming studios in North America, not only in US but also in Canada. That's how we actually found all these like even early stage gaming companies. And we recently set up our AI lab in Seattle, which actually sitting in our top level like. AI scientists actually, that's how we get the connections through like the Professor Benjo's lab. And I think so far we still need to go through that channel to get contact with us. And but we will come more often to here and also get to know like the local partners. That's especially important for us to know of you and try to understand what's your needs and also what's your like a request from us. Actually, we will try to arrange kind of a regular visit to here. It's kind of amazing to see the tech community here, and also all have done in the education space, in the fundamental research space, and how rapid development of like an AI space especially. That's really impressive. So we look forward to have like a more opportunity to working with like a different of like community members.
I'm going to ask one more question, but then I'm just going to prep here. If anybody in the audience has questions, you can perhaps start forming them while I ask a question here, because we have about 5 minutes left or so. Minister Baines, our Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, was here this morning, and he's our minister in charge of really helping develop the ecosystem and putting government policies in place to make sure that Canada really develops a next generation of prosperity based on innovation. As a company, you're working in so many different countries. You've seen so many different innovation ecosystems. You have, extensive investment activities in Southeast Asia, in Israel, in the Valley, as well as in Europe. I'm interested in terms of if you have any kind of initial impressions or advice you would give from a policy side to a country like Canada, who is in the stages of really trying to bring its innovation ecosystem to the next level. You've had some contact, as you said, with our AI capabilities in Montreal, spending some time here. Just wondered if you had any advice or impressions for us.
Well, I cannot see there any advice, since I'm quite new here. I'm still like learning and also try to get like understanding of the market. But I probably just share some of my personal observations. And one thing is that with the enhancement of technology, so the individual contribution is far more influential than anyone before. So you can see a very strong like AI engineer. The algorithm can actually surpass many of like the labor investments. My point is that actually you probably, with this like the new technology environment, you can just derive something you are really good at instead of like covering all the areas. So for example, taking an example of like the area I'm quite familiar with is the gaming side. So in the past, like 10 years, for a gaming company, you have to take care of all the technology you need. You need to have the game design, you need to have the art, you need to have the front end, back end, cloud service. At that time, that's still like a server service. But now you can only focus on one of the core technology. Normally, that's the game design, and you can outsource most of like artwork. Outside of the world, you can either use like Amazon or maybe like the Tencent Cloud in China with your like hosting service, and you don't have to deal with so much trouble only by yourself. So that's why we see like even very small team can actually create huge artwork and also like distribute that work actually to millions of users, domestic or even like internationally. So I think that might be my observation, is that you can just focus on really just one or two things you're really good at, but don't have to cover everything by yourself. The second thing is that the AI is everywhere, but we don't see like the value of like a general AI. Just like we have found in like the past, the mobile technology, the VR, AR technology, there like not too much space for purely like a mobile company or like an AR company, and in the future in the AI company. It got to be embedded with certain verticals or maybe like a certain scenario service to the end user. So the technology itself, together with like a data mining, with algorithm enhancement, and also with like a certain business case, actually, that's going to be like much more valuable than just purely theoretical improvement of the AI itself.
Right. So mindful of time here, but just thinking we should open up for a couple of questions. So I don't know if anyone out there has a microphone or whatever, but if there's a question.